There's very little about Jaehaerys in the world of Ice and Fire because, he was the good king. He reigned for 55 years of peace and prosperity. What's duller than peace and prosperity?
The Targaryen kings, the rulers of Westeros for just short of 300 years. Some of them did great things, and some of them did not so great things. Honestly, to me, the Targaryen kings and how different and alike they are is one of my favorite parts of the world of Ice and Fire, and how you can tell George R.R. Martin did his best to make each of them different, but also have certain kings resemble other kings within his story. Like some kings are really messed up and do crazy things, whereas others are thrown into the role and really don't know what to do. Others know exactly what they are doing and make sound decisions that actually help the people of Westeros. And I think a lot of people just lump these kings together into groups without actually examining what each king did during their time on the Iron Throne. Therefore, today we will be going over every Targaryen king, their accomplishments and misdeeds, and ranking them based off of the following criteria. Firstly, we will look at their deeds for the realm, what they accomplished for the small folk, how peaceful their reign was, and how the realm fared under their leadership. Secondly, we will be looking at what they did for the Targaryen dynasty, as I believe that how well a king prepares for his succession and what a king did for the strength of the Targaryen house is just as important to their ranking, because the strength of the royal house prevents the Game of Thrones. So without further ado, let's get started. Coming in last, being ranked as the worst Targaryen king, is King Aerys II, who was also known as the Mad King. Ah yes, the man, the myth, the king whose downfall kicked off the events of Season 1 of one of the greatest shows of all time.
While Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces, they certainly haven't forgotten about her.
If only they had stuck the landing. Anyways, the Mad King was truly the worst Targaryen king. Some people may try and tell you that it's Aegon IV, but Aerys was actually crazy to a point where he made all the wrong decisions that not even the unworthy would make. Aerys II inherited a stable realm and ruled quietly for many years, with Aerys having Tywin Lannister to thank for all of his accomplishments, because Tywin was the one making reforms that helped the realm and ensure peace, while Aerys kind of just sat on the throne planning eccentric plans that never came to fruition. However, shortly after this, Aerys would make bad move after bad move. The first of these was beginning to oppose Tywin on all matters after becoming jealous of him, resulting in the Duskendale situation where Aerys was held hostage for 6 months. Unfortunately for the realm, after Duskendale, Aerys went insane, making bad decisions that include killing people who he thought opposed him, pissing off and dismissing one of the greatest hands of the king ever, filling his court with people pleasers and with those who only told Aerys what he wanted to hear, and burning his Warden of the North alive with wildfire and killing off his heir. This resulted in Robert's Rebellion, where Aerys had 4 of his own kingdoms rise up against him, which ended the Targaryen dynasty. Aerys didn't really have any great accomplishments and brought civil war to the 7 kingdoms, which resulted in the downfall of his house, placing him here at the bottom. Up next is Aegon IV, also known as the Unworthy, who ranks barely above the Mad King. While Aegon IV was a terrible king, the only reason he isn't ranked last is because he didn't fully end the Targaryen dynasty, and at least had and kept Daeron as his heir, even if he believed that he wasn't the father to Daeron. But other than that, Aegon the Unworthy definitely didn't do the realm much good during his time as king. Aegon fed into the Bracken and Blackwood rivalry by gifting the Great Hills to the Blackwoods after they already belonged to the Brackens. He also tried invading Dorne, which is always a poor choice for any Targaryen king, with his fleet that he sent sinking on its journey to Dorne. Aegon also had 9 mistresses, which gave him many bastards, all of whom he legitimized on his deathbed, leading to 5 attempts over the following years for the Blackfyres to to usurp the throne from the Targaryens. Overall, Aegon put the realm in a far worse off position than it was already in when he inherited the throne, and only didn't end the dynasty because he failed to upset as many great houses as the Mad King did. Before we continue, if you are enjoying this video and love the world of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, then I would appreciate it if you subscribed and liked the video, as it would help me grow the channel and make more of these videos for you. However, following Aegon IV is a king who really weakened the Targaryen power and made poor decisions as king, with that being King Viserys I, who ruled at the height of Targaryen power. King Viserys' worst problem was how he handled the succession question, especially due to the fact that the Great Council of 101 AC declared that a man be placed above a woman in order of succession. As soon as Aegon was born, Viserys should have called all of his lords in the realm and had them reaffirm their fealty to Rhaenyra. Or he could have declared that gender no longer mattered for succession. Or he could have married Rhaenyra to Aegon to guarantee her the throne. Additionally, Viserys sat by and watched as growing factions of his family, also known as the Blacks and Greens, grew to resent each other more and more and separated them from each other. Viserys sent Rhaenyra to stay isolated on Dragonstone and left the Greens in positions of power, such as his hand, Otto Hightower. This placed the Greens in the perfect position to claim the throne in King's Landing. To prevent this, Viserys should have stepped down from the throne and called Rhaenyra while still alive, or changed his succession if he wanted to prevent the war that would follow. The main thing, however, that works in Viserys' favor is that the realm was peaceful for 26 years, even if there were seeds of dysfunction growing, and Viserys would be higher up on this list if he would have taken action after the birth of Aegon II and is knocked for weakening the Targaryens when they were arguably the strongest that they ever were. However, following Viserys I is his son, who led many great houses to war and is someone who greatly weakened the Targaryens' power. Aegon II falls into this spot due to his involvement in the Dance of the Dragons and his actions that he took during the war. Now, regardless of whether you are Team Black or Team Green, I think we can both admit that his reign was not great for the Targaryens and their line. The Dance of the Dragons prevented Aegon from really doing anything for the small folk, as there were 11 battles that took place during his short reign, and he completely weakened the Targaryens' power as 21 dragons took part in the dance, with all of them dying during the Civil War, or shortly thereafter. Additionally, many Targaryens died during this war, which weakened the Targaryen bloodline. Overall, it's hard to say if Aegon would have been a good king, as the Book of Fire and Blood highlights him far more favorably than the show, but due to his legacy, he falls in this spot here. After Aegon II, we have Aenys I, who was the second Targaryen king, as he was weak and too willing to defer to others, which was the opposite of what his father had put into place with the Targaryen monarchy. Aenys was good to his lords and granted them boons if they put down rebellions, which inspired loyalty. However, Aenys struggled to define his own path outside of this and made missteps, which led to his downfall. The first was his relationship with the faith, and he allowed them to be removed from the Iron Islands and reopened problems with the faith when he married his heir Aegon and his eldest daughter Rhaena together in the midst of growing contention with the faith. His second problem was being seen as weak, whether it was allowing his brother Maegor to do as he pleased or not swiftly putting down rebellions as he could have, with it being left to his proactive bannermen, or in my opinion, the worst example of his inaction comes from not being able to put down the faith uprisings, with Aenys fleeing to Dragonstone, which allowed for the poor fellows to kill the small folk on the roads, which resulted in his own lords refusing to help him, and instead his lords actively worked against him. Up next is the young dragon Daeron I, with Daeron being at the top of the bottom of the Targaryen kings for me, as he was able to accomplish something that even Aegon the Conqueror wasn't able to do in conquering Dorne, even if he wasn't able to hold it forever. One of the best moves that Daeron made during his reign was keeping his uncle Viserys as his hand of the king and relied on him to rule, which put a power structure into place. Daeron was also very intelligent in battle strategy, and in his 4 short years of ruling, he was able to establish the blueprint for future kings to highlight how powerful the forces of Westeros could be when mustered properly together. In his conquest of Dorne, he forced the Dornish forces to fight on two fronts by leading a charge through the Bone Way and sending Alan Velaryon around the continent and up the Dornish rivers. Although he was able to conquer Dorne, he wasn't able to hold Dorne, and in the process of conquering Dorne, 10,000 people died, with 40,000 people dying to keep it, which greatly weakened the realm and definitely hurt the common people of Westeros. He also lost the Conqueror's Crown, which is a symbol of Targaryen power, which doesn't bode well for the Targaryen status as untouchable. After Daeron I comes Aerys I, who is kind of a king who I believe didn't really do anything during his time as king. Aerys' best decision was similar to Daeron's in his choosing of his hand, with Aerys picking Brendan Rivers after a few rough years of being king, with the great spring sickness striking the realm. Picking Brendan Rivers for his hand of the king worked out well, as Bloodraven was able to quickly put down the second and third Blackfire rebellions. Additionally, Aerys tried to be peaceful, as he tried sending Aegor Rivers to the wall, as his deep studies of history and scrolls likely influenced this decision, even if it did not work out for him. However, other problems during Aerys' reign include that travel in the realm was regarded as less safe than under his father. He also had to deal with Ironborn raiders on the west coast of Westeros. Also, Aerys did not produce any further heirs during his reign, with him having to name 4 different Targaryens to be his heir, with the throne finally falling to Maekar. Overall, Aerys to me seems like a Targaryen king who tried to just keep things peaceful and didn't really care for ruling, and that's why he is placed here on the list. Following Aerys I is Maegor I, also known as the Cruel, and honestly, I believe that Maegor the Cruel gets ranked very harshly when looking at Targaryen kings, and is definitely not as bad as people make him out to be, especially when it comes to the survival of the Targaryens. During his time, Maegor was at least able to accomplish some positive things, with the first being that Maegor did his job by placing the faith and the poor fellows in check as he went to war with them upon assuming the Iron Throne. Maegor did not try to appease or negotiate with them, and because of this, he became their main focus, which would eventually lead to Maegor's downfall, but it established the precedent that Targaryens do not follow the faith and its customs and should not be expected to. Now, Maegor didn't resolve this problem to the fullest, but he solved the problems that occurred under his brother Aenys, as the faith stopped killing people on the roadside in Westeros, and it put Jaehaerys into a position of strength as he was able to negotiate with the faith. Additionally, Maegor completed the Red Keep and expanded upon its initial designs by adding more fortifications to the Targaryens' home and secret passageways. However, Maegor was overtly cruel and over the top with his actions that led the realm to turn against him. He was not kind to the small folk, especially when he killed all of the builders in the Red Keep to ensure that he alone knew the secrets of its passageways, and killed his nephews, Aegon and Viserys, which weakened the Targaryen line. Overall, Maegor was not a great or noble king, but he placed a check on the faith, which Jaehaerys would point to during his reign to ensure that the faith came to the table to negotiate, and was a big enough of a problem that it united the faith and the realm behind his nephew, Jaehaerys, to take the Iron Throne. After Maegor comes the king that made his own crown when he took the Iron Throne, with that being Maekar I. Maekar, by nature, was harsh and quick to judge, but was a warrior king and was someone who wasn't afraid to fight with his own men. Maekar also ruled the realm for 12 years, with his best move being that he kept Bloodraven as his hand, and although Bloodraven's methods were definitely questionable, I don't think that anyone can claim his actions did not keep the Targaryens in power and the realm peaceful. Maekar also gets points for making sure he had heirs in place for when he died. However, Maekar was definitely unlucky with his heirs, as one was a drunk, with the other being an idiot, the third a maester, and eventually his fourth son became king. Although some might say Maekar was not a great father, he did do his job as king in making sure that he had heirs. Overall, Maekar died the way that he lived as a warrior, and for his peaceful reign in which he showed strength, Maekar falls here on this list. Following Maekar is Baelor the Blessed, who is the complete opposite of Maekar in about every way. Baelor's reign is probably one of the first on this list, where the king's reign was more positive than negative, and while the two kings before him on the list didn't do a ton of harm, I view their reign as more neutral to the Targaryen line. However, Baelor's actions following his brother's reign are what help him in his ranking. Following the death of King Daeron I, Baelor took the Iron Throne and immediately worked to make peace with Dorne by leading the hostages back to Sunspear on horseback, while Baelor himself made the journey by foot. This approach definitely worked, as he was not only able to make the journey, but also accomplish peace with Dorne and laid the groundwork for Dorne to join the Seven Kingdoms. The second great act that Baelor accomplished was his rescue of Aemon Targaryen, the Dragon Knight, a great warrior and a fine member of the Kingsguard. Aemon's rescue was important because he would later play an important part in protecting his brother, King Aegon IV, from assassins, and even gave his life to do so. The second benefit to this rescue was that the Targaryens got back one of their own, which restored strength to their house. Additionally, Baelor gets positive marks for his reign being peaceful, as Baelor was very pious and didn't do anything to upset his vassals, which can't be said about every king, and left the ruling to his uncle and hand, Viserys. Finally, Baelor gets positive marks for building the Sept of Baelor, which would become a tomb for all Targaryen kings and strengthened the relationship between the faith and the Targaryen family. However, Baelor is not without his faults, with his biggest drawback being the Maiden Vault, in where he locked up 3 of his sisters after getting the High Septon to end his marriage to his sister Dana. Baelor's Maiden Vault was very messed up and weakened the Targaryen family, as he could have easily wed his sisters and given them freedom, which would have strengthened the Targaryen family by building blood alliances. Secondly, his relationship with the faith is also a negative, as Baelor was a little too pious and eventually got killed by fasting for too long. Additionally, he made an 8-year-old boy the High Septon, which wasn't a great idea, as when asked to help save the king's life, the High Septon couldn't do anything. Overall, Baelor was a good king due to his peaceful tendencies and by trusting his uncle Viserys to run the realm in his stead. Following Baelor is Jaehaerys, who had a very short but meaningful reign, as he accomplished a few things without having really any negatives. Firstly, after ascending the throne immediately following the tragedy of Summerhall, King Jaehaerys was informed about the threat of the Ninepenny Kings, and instead of residing to his grief with the loss of his family members, Jaehaerys examined his father's defense plans and decided to go to war to the soon-be invaders who resided on the Stepstones by giving command of the war effort to his hand, which prevented invaders from landing on his shores and protected the small folk. Although there was loss of life, King Jaehaerys II's actions prevented even more bloodshed and kept the realm safe. The second major thing that Jaehaerys made sure to do was handling the complaints of his lords over his father's reforms, with Jaehaerys working with his lords to ensure a peaceful reign. Although Jaehaerys' heir would end the Targaryen reign, we can't really hold this against him, and for his actions during his short and peaceful reign, he falls here. Following Jaehaerys II is his father, King Aegon V, also known as the Unlikely, who I believe gets a little too much more praise than he deserves. And although Aegon was a good king and sat the throne for many years, he also hurt the Targaryens' strength with his actions. Overall, Aegon's best act is arguably his care for the small folk during the winter from the years 233 AC to 236 AC, as he did his best to take care of those starving in the north and suffering from the winter's harsh environment. This was just the beginning of Aegon's reforms for the small folk, as he expanded and gave them more rights than they had before he took the Iron Throne, which was good for the small folk but upset Aegon's vassals. Although Aegon's reign was peaceful, despite a few uprisings here and there, he had no love or support from his lords, even though he tried to win them over. Aegon and his wife arranged marriages with his children to the great houses of Westeros, with only one of them panning out, which had negative backlash and even a Baratheon rebellion. Additionally, Aegon V weakened the Targaryen line for his part in planning what would become the tragedy of Summerhall, which killed most of the living Targaryens, including himself, his eldest son, Duncan Targaryen, and his wife, and others including Duncan the Tall, his Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, all in a failed plot to hatch dragon eggs. These problems I just can't look past. And although Aegon was great for the small folk, he is the 6th best Targaryen king. Following Aegon V is Aegon III, the best king named Aegon other than the conqueror that they are named after. Unfortunately for Aegon III, he isn't remembered fondly by the realm, mainly due to the last of the dragons dying during his reign and due to the reign of his sons. However, I would argue that Aegon III was a successful king who reigned over a quarter of a century and is really the person who restored the Targaryen dynasty's place in the realm after the chaos of the Dance of the Dragons, since the Targaryen strength wasn't all that sound after the dance, which is reflected in Aegon's regency, where minor lords played a watered-down Game of Thrones. Aegon was a flawed king, but did what he could to restore the strength of the Targaryen line by having 5 kids, including his 2 heirs. Additionally, his brother Viserys was returned to him due to the work of Alan Velaryon, who paid a high ransom for Viserys and returned him, which would prove valuable as his brother would later become a great hand and eventually a great king. Another benefit of Aegon's reign was that it was very peaceful, as he was able to win over the houses of Baratheon and Lannister, who served him during his reign, which united the realm, since these houses did not support his mother during the Dance of the Dragons. Additionally, Aegon's reign only had 2 real drawbacks, which weren't really his fault given the circumstances, but do count against him. The first is that the last of the dragons died during his reign, and he did inherit riderless dragons at the start of his reign, with Aegon refusing to give them riders. The second is the chaos that occurred during his regency, with Lord Onwin Peake gaining more power and titles from his position, but Aegon and his brother Viserys would put an end to his regency at the age of 16, with Lord Peake falling out of favor with the Iron Throne. Although Aegon is not remembered fondly in Westeros, his reign was peaceful and placed the Targaryens back into a position of strength within the realm. Following Aegon III is his brother Viserys II, whose reign was very short and only lasted more than a year. However, Viserys was able to accomplish very much during this time. Due to his long and peaceful tenure as Hand of the King, Viserys was a master of politics and gave birth to 2 sons to strengthen the Targaryen line. And although Aegon IV was a terrible king, it was unlikely that Viserys would ever believe that his son would become king of Westeros, and was likely too busy running the realm for his brother and nephews to teach his son how to rule. Another benefit of King Viserys II's reign was his reforms that set the Iron Throne up for success, which included increasing trade with those across the Narrow Sea, establishing a royal mint, reforming how the royal family operates and works, while improving upon the code of laws established by King Jaehaerys I. The act of securing the line of succession and creating reforms that placed the Targaryens into a great position earns Viserys his spot as one of the 4 best Targaryen kings. Ranking just above Viserys is his grandson, King Daeron II, who is also known as the Good. At the beginning of his reign, Daeron ensured that peace was possible by working to reform the institutions that his father changed to fit his lustful desires. Within a year of taking the Iron Throne, he put capable lords back on the small council and revamped the City Watch to make it no longer serve the king's desires, but to protect the city. Secondly, Daeron ensured that Dorne finally entered the Seven Kingdoms, even though it was unpopular, which would prove beneficial as Dorne became a strong ally of the Targaryen family, even when it faced slights. Thirdly, Daeron had 4 sons, with 2 of them becoming king, which is one of the more successful inheritance lines within the Targaryen family. However, Daeron made mistakes that led to the Blackfyre Rebellion, such as a failed attempt to arrest his half-brother, Daemon Blackfyre, after raising him up, and although he was quick to put down the rebellion and snuff out its flames, he definitely could have avoided it much earlier, as Daemon did not declare for the Iron Throne until about 10 years into Daeron's reign. Overall, Daeron II earns his nickname as the Good, and that is why he earns his place here as the 3rd best Targaryen king. Coming in second and just short of the first place spot is the king who started it all with Aegon the Conqueror.
The Conqueror.
Yes, Alicent, the Conqueror. Aegon the Conqueror is the man who established the Targaryen dynasty and brought the kingdoms together, which is probably the greatest act of any Targaryen king, as it brought on unprecedented peace. Aegon also established the royal progression, which was another great act, as he traveled around the 7 kingdoms with different maesters to ensure that he met his new subjects while being informed on the different customs of the different realms. Aegon also created the infrastructure for the modern Targaryen monarchy, as he founded the Kingsguard and brought in other lords to help run the realm and established the office of Hand of the King. However, Aegon really did have one major flaw: Dorne. In his quest to unite the 7 kingdoms, Aegon led a faulty campaign to conquer Dorne and lost his sister wife Rhaenys Targaryen, her dragon, and countless men against an opponent he didn't really understand. Despite this flaw, Aegon was a great king who established the realm, but was outlived and outruled by the best king. Coming in first is King Jaehaerys I, also known as the Conciliator, as he was the longest ruling Targaryen king, and I would argue that he is the greatest due to making proper use of his long reign. Jaehaerys' reign was very positive, with many good things occurring during his long tenure as King of Westeros. Firstly, Jaehaerys reunited the faith and the crown through his friend and hand, Septon Barth, which in exchange for putting down their swords forever and accepting outside justice, the faith got the crown's promise that they would always be protected by the Iron Throne. Secondly, King Jaehaerys, on the urging of his wife, gave the Night's Watch the new gift and ended the marriage tradition of First Night, where the lord of the area has the privilege to bed the bride of the small folk on the first night. Finally, Jaehaerys created an environment for Targaryens to thrive in, as there was peace and prosperity in the realm, which led to a period of the most Targaryens being alive at one time when Viserys took the Iron Throne upon Jaehaerys' death. I would say that Jaehaerys' only real fault is his treatment of his wife and daughters. However, this is more of a flaw on him as a husband and a father, and not really as a king, as it was customary for the men to precede the women during Jaehaerys' time. Overall, King Jaehaerys' reign was amazing for the realm, and his 55 years as king really can't be overlooked by how positive it was not only for Westeros, but for the strength of the Targaryen family. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any comments or disagreements, please put them in the comments down below, and click right here to watch some shorts about the reign of every Targaryen king, and click right here if you want to watch another one of my videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.